The first story comes from a man named Eric who loved going on late evening walks after work. He described himself as someone who found comfort in quiet trails, especially the small wooded park behind his apartment complex. He had walked that path dozens of times. He knew every turn, every bench, every leaning tree. For him, the park felt familiar, safe, but one particular night in early autumn, just after sunset, he sensed something was wrong the moment he stepped into the tree line. The park felt too still, as if everything, animals, wind, even the air itself, was holding its breath. Eric tried to shake the feeling and kept walking, telling himself it was just because the nights were getting colder. He was about 10 minutes deep into the path when he heard it. Footsteps, soft, light, and slow. They weren't behind him. They weren't beside him. They sounded like they were coming from deeper in the woods, tracking parallel to him as he walked. He stopped walking, and the steps stopped too. He moved again, this time deliberately dragging his feet to make noise. And there it was again, that quiet crunching sound moving in sync, only hidden somewhere beyond the trees. Eric felt a heavy pressure in his chest, a primal instinct whispering that he wasn't alone. He decided to turn back early, but when he did, he noticed something strange. The path behind him, the one he had just walked, looked darker than usual. It was as if the trees had closed in. As he walked back toward the entrance, the footsteps became louder and closer, not running, not creeping, just calmly following him, never too close, but never far enough away to ignore. When Eric finally reached the small clearing near the exit of the trail, he turned, expecting to see maybe an animal or some person trying to scare him. Instead, he saw nothing, no movement, no shape. Just trees, but the footsteps didn't stop. They circled him. He heard them clearly on the leaves, crunching slowly, deliberately, as if someone or something was walking around him in a wide circle just beyond the tree line. He froze, the circle tightened, the footsteps grew closer, and for the first time he heard breathing, not human breathing. It was low, wet, and heavy, almost like a growl being held back. Eric bolted toward the exit, sprinting harder than he ever had in his life. As he ran, he swore he heard something following him, fast, matching his pace, but never stepping onto the trail. When he finally burst out of the park and into the streetlight glow near his building, everything went silent. Completely silent. The footsteps stopped instantly, as if whatever had been following him refused to leave the boundary of the woods. Eric looked back. The trees were still, but he saw something. Two faint, pale shapes deep in the darkness. Two eyes watching him. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They just stared. He never used that trail again, and even months later, he says he sometimes wakes up at night convinced he can still hear those slow footsteps circling his bed. The second story comes from a woman named Lee who worked as a wildlife photographer in her free time. She loved nature, forests, and especially national parks. Her story takes place at a large state park known for its scenic cliffs and waterfalls. She went there on a crisp morning in October to capture fog rolling through the trees, something she had always wanted to photograph. The park was nearly empty that day, and the quiet atmosphere made everything feel peaceful. She spent hours walking along the trails, taking photos, and exploring areas she'd never visited before. Around noon, she wandered off the main path to get a better angle of a cliffside view. There was a smaller, unofficial trail that seemed used enough to follow safely. As she walked deeper, she noticed strange carvings on some of the trees. Not initials, not hearts, not symbols she recognized. They looked like rough scratches, long vertical marks cut deep into the bark. They were spaced almost evenly apart along the trail, as if someone, or something, had dragged their hand across each one as they walked. Lee didn't think too much of it at first. Maybe it was a bored hiker. Maybe it was bears, but the marks were too high for a human and too clean for an animal. She reached an area where the trees thinned and the ground dipped into a rocky slope. That's when she felt an odd vibration beneath her feet, like something shifting under the earth. She knelt down and assumed it might be loose ground or a hollow space beneath the rocks, but when she pressed her hand to the dirt, she felt something moving, something slow, like a large animal crawling underground. She stood up quickly and backed away. The woods were silent, no birds, no wind, just silence. She should have turned around then, but curiosity pushed her a little farther. A few minutes later, she reached a clearing she didn't recognize, one not shown on the park map. In the center stood a giant fallen tree, split open like it had been struck by lightning, but inside the hollow trunk was something that made her step back. Bones, dozens of them, small ones, large ones, clean ones, scattered inside like something had been storing them there. Lee lifted her camera instinctively and zoomed in for detail, but the moment she clicked the shutter, she heard a loud snap from somewhere behind her. Not a twig, not a branch, something big stepping on something solid. She turned slowly. At the edge of the clearing stood a shape, tall, too tall, thin, almost impossibly thin, with long arms that nearly reached its knees. Its skin looked grayish, stretched tight over its bones, and its head was slightly tilted as though studying her. Its eyes were black, completely black like empty holes. It didn't move, it didn't blink. It only stared. Lee felt her body lock up in fear. She tried to lift her camera again, but her hands were shaking too badly to hold it steady. The creature took one step forward, and the sound it made wasn't like a foot on leaves. It was like bones scraping against stone. She ran, sprinting blindly through the woods, branches slashing her arms as she pushed through them. She didn't dare look back. She didn't know if it was chasing her, but she heard those scraping footsteps behind her, slow but steady. When she finally reached the main trail, she could no longer hear it. She didn't stop running until she reached her car. She drove home shaking, and when she checked her camera later, she found that the last photo she took of the fallen tree and the bones was blurred in a strange way. Not normal motion blur. Something distorted the image, almost as if something had moved in front of the lens at the moment she pressed the shutter. The third story comes from a group of friends who visited a large urban park late one night. The park was popular during the day, but avoided at night because of its dense forested areas and long, winding trails. The friends, Daniel, Marcus, and Hattie, decided to go on a nighttime walk just for fun, thinking it would be a harmless way to kill time. They joked around, teased each other, and tried to scare one another with fake noises, but their laughter faded the deeper they went. The darkness felt unnatural. Even the moonlight seemed swallowed by the trees. They reached an old wooden bridge that crossed a shallow creek. The bridge looked worn, the wood gray and weathered. As they stepped onto it, the boards creaked loudly. When they reached the middle, Marcus noticed something carved into the railing. It said, "If you hear it, don't run." They all laughed at first, assuming it was some kid trying to spook people. But then Daniel froze and held up his hand for silence. He heard something, a faint humming sound. Low and melodic, almost like a woman singing far off in the distance. The others heard it too, a soft, slow tune drifting through the air, growing louder and clearer. It wasn't just humming, it was singing. But the voice sounded wrong, too slow, too drawn out, like the singer was struggling to form each note. They looked at each other, panicked but unsure what to do. The voice grew louder, closer. It was coming from the trees behind them. Then it stopped. Silence. Daniel whispered that they should go back, but before they could move, the singing started again, this time from the opposite side of the bridge in front of them. It echoed across the creek, the tone rising and falling in a way that made their skin crawl. They couldn't see anyone. The path ahead was empty, but the voice was definitely there, just beyond the bend. Hattie suggested running back the way they came, but Marcus reminded them of the message carved into the railing. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe running was the worst thing they could do. They slowly backed off the bridge, moving carefully, trying not to make noise, but halfway across, something tapped the railing on the other side of the bridge. Tap, 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 like someone dragging their fingernails along the wood. The singing grew louder, almost frantic, like the voice was circling them. It echoed from different directions, behind them, ahead of them, beside them, but they saw nothing. They tried to stay calm, but the fear was overwhelming. Finally, Daniel whispered that they should walk, fast, not running, toward the exit of the park. As they moved down the trail, the singing followed them. Always behind them, never too close but never fading. The worst part wasn't the singing, though. It was the slow, rhythmic breathing that began to accompany it. heavy breaths between the notes like someone standing right behind them inches from their necks. But when they forced themselves to glance back, the trail was empty. The singing didn't stop until they reached the park entrance. The moment they stepped past the gate, it cut off instantly, leaving only the sound of their own terrified breathing. They never found out who or what had been following them that night, but all three swear that whenever they pass that park now, even from a distance, they sometimes hear that faint humming drifting from the trees. These stories remind us that parks, no matter how peaceful they seem during the day, can become entirely different places once the sun goes down, places where you're not always sure what's watching you from the shadows. Places where footsteps follow you even when you can't see who or what is making them. Places that hold secrets older than the trails we walk on. If you ever find yourself alone in a park at night, listen carefully. Because sometimes the quietest moments hide the loudest fears. If you enjoyed these terrifying true stories, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more horror content. And remember, the woods may look calm, but you never know what's standing just beyond the trees. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.